Welcome to the Misophonia podcast. This is episode 17 of season 5. My name's Adil Ahmad, and I have Misophonia. This week, I'm talking to Michelle. Michelle works in medical sales and had a pretty typical onset story, though she moved around a lot, being in a military family. We talk about those early years, what it's like now working in her current role, visiting a lot of clients, plus her go-to earplugs, and how she deals with home life, living with her boyfriend and her teenage son. Remember, you can follow the show on Instagram at Misophonia Podcast, also Facebook, Twitter. And if you like this or any episode, you can really help by leaving a quick rating or review wherever you listen to this podcast so that we can maybe move up a little bit in the algorithms and be in front of more misophones. And don't forget, you can also support the show financially if you want on Patreon at our Patreon page, patreon.com/Misophonia Podcast. All right, now here's my conversation with Michelle. Michelle, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you here.
Thank you. I love having these conversations.
Yeah. First, you want to tell folks kind of like roughly where you're located?
So I'm in Sacramento, California.
Right, we're in West Coast. I figured 2 hours back.
Yep.
And then you said you're in sales and marketing?
I am. Yeah, I'm medical sales and marketing.
Gotcha. Okay. Actually, I think I had somebody on a couple of seasons ago who's doing something in medical or pharmaceutical sales. Anyways, so I guess and you were also mentioning a lot of conversations. Maybe why don't we start with your current work situation? We'll obviously get into your history and whatnot, but a lot of conversations with people. That's obviously mostly virtual. How's it kind of been for misophonia?
Honestly, I've found that's a lot easier. I work with a lot of senior citizens, and I visit senior facilities and things like that. It's actually been, I always feel a lot more comfortable in front of people, but when it comes to triggers and things like that, virtual is always a little bit easier.
Okay, so you're able to avoid things virtually. I guess you can mute people.
You can mute, absolutely. It really just depends. If I'm on Zoom without my AirPods, I feel like you can hear a lot more with your AirPods in. Like it feels like it's a lot more like in your ear. But if I'm not wearing the AirPods, I don't really have any issues with it.
Right. Is there have you told anybody at work, or have you had to kind of get any accommodations maybe?
No, what I think is funny, and you could probably relate to this. I think everybody always thinks of it as kind of a joke. And that's how I would get by with it, as well. It was like, oh God, you're chewing so loud, or you try to kind of throw little tidbits out at them so maybe they'd be a little bit more conscious of it. But I always feel like people bring it up as a joke, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, I've had people, eat cereal on Zoom calls, and it's like, you try to. I tell them like, can we like not maybe eat on these calls? And there's always like oh yeah, okay, hey, hee, a few laughs around, and a joke might be made out of it, but I'm
sure
dead serious.
Well, you're dead serious, and it's causing a visceral reaction. I mean, I get to the point where it's kind of fight or flight. Like, I need to get out of this room. I cannot stay in this room any longer. At work, we are back to having meetings in our office once a week. And I have an issue with slurping, when somebody is slurping their coffee, and it takes me out of everything. And it's the only thing I can hear. And I end up pressing in on my ear, so it's a little muted. But you also don't, I've gotten past I don't shoot anybody daggers anymore because they don't know what they're doing. But I've gotten to a point where I have these little earplugs that look like jewelry.
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a slave for fashion. So I found these really cute little earplugs that actually look like jewelry. So I can wear those as well.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you have the name of those?
They are Loop, Loop.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, I think I'm familiar with those. They
And I
get
actually,
promoted online.
yeah, and there's also, I just saw another brand that actually have little jewels on them. So, it's out there. It's
Yeah,
and you can stay fashionable.
right, right, right. Well, and have you brought up misophonia with anybody at work, or you just kind of flash them jewelry and then
I've talked a little bit about it. I'm fortunate that in my job I'm alone in the car a lot. I'm driving a lot and going to different meetings and different facilities. So I'm really only in the office about 1 day a week, and that's for that
gotcha,
meeting. Yeah, yeah.
gotcha. Okay, okay. Yeah. Well, maybe let's do a sudden rewind back to kind of
Mhm.
early years from Michelle. You want to tell us kind of like around when you started maybe noticing some of these sounds?
So honestly, it started with my mom and her gum, and I
Mm.
love her dearly. But again, it was that instant anger. She would start to kind of snap and pop her gum. And quite honestly, I hate gum. I hate it.
Gum's
I
come
don't
up a
want
lot
anybody,
recently.
I do
Yeah.
not want anybody chewing it around me. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to see it. And I think that was the first time I realized that it causes, and I hate to, it's almost embarrassing to say, but it causes anger at that person.
Oh yeah.
And, and that's when I first noticed it. And then there's one event, and again, it involves gum that really stands out to where I I was living in San Francisco, and there was a woman behind me, and she was kind of doing the same thing. It was cracking and snapping and popping her gum. And I would take the bus through Chinatown into South Market in San
The number
Francisco.
30, the number 30
The
bus, I
number
think.
30 or the
Yeah.
45,
Yeah.
depending. I
Yeah.
lived in North Beach. And so if you know when you're on the 30, you go through Chinatown and
Mm.
the buses fill up
Mm-hmm.
and everybody's right there up on you. You hear everything. And I ended up
A lot of
actually
plastic
getting
bags and yeah.
plastic bags, chewing, popping of gum. And I remember this woman was chewing her gum, and I got off the bus early. I was like, I will walk the rest of the way. I need to get out of here. And that's when I realized it caused that fight or flight. Like if I stay here, it's just going to brew and it might boil over. I need to get
Yeah.
away from it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was,
No.
and then and then, you notice it with people and you feel like it's your fault and there's something wrong with you. These poor people are just trying to eat their meal or their soup
Right.
or, and so you start to feel a little guilty about being, having that type of a reaction.
Oh,
So
exactly. Especially when the triggerer is like a close relative, like your mom.
yeah.
How did that kind of progress with your mom? I'm assuming did it start the kind of that middle school kind of age?
Yeah, actually, it was right. I remember where I was sitting when it stands out. It must have been in like eighth grade. We had
Mm, yeah.
just moved. It was around eighth grade, and unfortunately, again, I love my mom, and she will probably never listen to this, so I think I'm safe. But um, those weren't the types of things that you could share with her. There was always a lot of suck it up buttercup or get over it, and so I never really spoke to her about it. And again, I think that we are made to feel guilty for what we feel are flaws, and so it's a little embarrassing when you don't quite understand what's going on.
Yeah, hopefully that will change. I mean, I think a lot of mental health issues in the past where people felt guilty about, like just basic anxiety or OECD or things like that. So I
Well,
think
like
we're
what's wrong with me?
yeah, yeah.
And in society, you hide your flaws. Look at Facebook and Instagram. How often do you
Hmm.
see, posts of somebody who when they look horrible? We're only supposed to talk about the good things, not the things that, that we, suffer from, or that we're dealing with.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, it's not really there's not really a real Photoshop for mental health like there is one for
Right?
pictures
Wouldn't
on
that be
social media.
nice?
Uh,
I would like to use the Nashville filter for my
right,
my ailments, please. Does that
right,
make it look any better?
right. And how is the you mentioned you moved around that time. I'm just curious, like was it an easy move? Was it kind of a kind of a rough move?
Well, my dad was in the military, so we moved a lot.
Okay. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
gotcha.
And
Okay.
so, and it was right around the time I was having other issues, which we now know was ADD.
Mm.
So I always felt that it kind of probably went hand in hand. And it was
So you got
misdiagnosed. Go ahead.
no, that's exactly what I was going to kind of move towards was like, was the misophonia just kind of like rolled into another diagnosis, which usually is
Yes.
the case because, nobody knows when nobody knew what it was.
Right. It was, and that, and well, she's depressed. I think that's what everybody, you know, they want to
Yeah.
put you in a box. And so I think so often you are misdiagnosed, and there's not, you really have to be your own advocate. And as a kid, you can't really do that. And you have to have parents that are going to be your advocate. Um, but again, military family, always very loving, but there was a lot of just suck it up.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you?
How did you react or act out?
So I just got to the point where I just didn't want to listen to anybody.
Mm,
If you're not going to listen to me, I was always a really emotional
mm,
person, but I also feel it was because I always felt like I kind of had a heightened um, emotional sense where
mm.
I felt things a little, this sounds cheesy, but I always kind of felt things a little bit deeper than other people. Like I would always worry about other people,
Mm,
um, or I would think too much. I'd get up in my head. And
mm.
so when that would happen and I would want to talk to somebody about it, it was, oh, she must be depressed. And we're talking in the 80s here. So, again, there just wasn't a lot out there for people. We couldn't Google it. That's
Yeah,
the only reason I knew what it was is when, I was able to get online and go, this is what happens. What is this? And I
yeah.
went, oh, there is a condition. I am not crazy.
Right, right.
So, yeah.
Yes. Oh man, I was going to ask you something good and then I totally forgot. But okay, yes. So you kind of right. You kind of it was kind of yeah. You kind of so when you said you didn't listen to people, you just kind of it wasn't like you don't mean but just by closing your ears and stuff. It was like you were kind of like rebelling a little bit.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I really think that it all wrapped into the ADD. And it wasn't ADHD, it was ADD. It was just, oh, look at shiny thing. And
Mm,
I was off to do it and doing something else. But I was always a little bit rebellious, and I was always kind of wanting to be an individual, and I didn't want anybody to tell me because I said so, because I needed more information. That doesn't
Oh, I
work for me.
remember. Yeah, actually, now I remember what I was going to say was that I've had quite a few people identify as HSP, which is like I don't know if that's official, but like highly sensitive person. So I've
Hmm.
had a number of people come on who do kind of have said similar things where their entire lives they've felt like hypersensitive to um, things that are going on around them. It's not just like being depressed. It's like just being it was being just kind of especially tuned in to others' feelings and just things happening to them. So I wonder if there's any relation there. But
Well, don't you think that makes sense?
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
with misophonia, we are, affected by sounds more so than others, and
Right.
triggering sounds. And so I think it makes sense. And like I said, as I've gotten older, I've been able to kind of accept these things and actually embrace them. But I think it all makes sense. I think they would definitely go hand in hand in being highly sensitive,
Yeah, I would
in all
say.
aspects.
Yeah, I would say a heightened sense of self-awareness. I mean, sometimes I feel like
Hmm.
I can kind of read everything that's going on, even though other people might not realize it.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know if that's true in every situation, but I definitely think that's above average for me, and I'm sure with a lot of us. I mean, it seems like it's talking to everybody. How did things maybe progress through like high school? Was it other people starting to affect you? Were you getting triggered in school?
Oh, yeah. It was, and it wasn't just sounds. It was anybody putting their foot just slightly on my chair, or,
Ah,
you know,
so
I was
sound.
always,
Sorry, touch, tactile sensitivities as
yes.
well. Yeah.
And it was just, and again, it would take me straight out of whatever we would do in class. And that's all I could feel. It was all I could hear. It was just, it was all consuming. And again, it would trigger that I got to get out of here. And that's all I
Mm.
could think about. Um, so yeah, I just was never, and again, there was the ADD as well. So I was just never able to really focus in.
Did you get medication
So
for the ADD? I don't know what was going on in the 80s in
not
terms of
until
medication.
not until an adult, not until
Mm.
I was actually able to speak about it with experiences, and actually tell my doctor, this is what I'm experiencing. This is what I've experienced since I was a kid.
Mm.
And I had a doctor who was wonderful and said, "You are textbook."
Yeah.
Because I was literally, I would drive down the street and it was, oh, look, a bird, oh, look, a shiny thing, and I sideswiped a parked car.
Oh,
Just
really? Wow. Okay. Yeah.
but it was, and then, I would be brushing my teeth and I would shove my toothbrush into my cheek, and then I'd start blow drying my hair before I was done brushing my teeth. I mean, just
Wow.
little things like that, when you don't know about these things, your parents just think that you're flighty, or, you know, it was always just like, oh, that's just Michelle.
I remember women used to be called hysterical like 100 years ago or 50 years ago,
Oh, right. I
like in
would
the
be in
ancient
some weird
times. Yeah.
institution, and
Right.
with that frontal lobotomy and electric
Oh
shock,
God, no.
and I'm
Yeah.
sure, everything that I find charming and quirky about myself today would have been zapped out of me.
Mhm. What did
But
your
yeah.
friends think? Or like other people around you in school, especially around high school and further.
So, I always kind of felt like an oddball. Um, I I didn't I was not picked on by any stretch.
Mm.
I knew everybody, everybody kind of knew me, but I was never claimed by anybody, if that makes any sense. So
Gotcha. They
I didn't
claimed like
make,
in terms of targeted for
or
bullying.
even, no, or even like in a group,
Oh,
have your group
gotcha.
of
Yeah.
friends.
Yeah.
I was always just a loner. But again, I think that also comes from being in a military family, and we
Mm.
would move, quite a bit. So in elementary school and middle school, I was fortunate
Mm.
to be in the same high school, but I moved a lot during middle school and
Mm.
elementary school.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
I, I think I was able to really, I don't want to say suppress it. I always just thought something was wrong with me. So, like I
Yeah.
said, there was this little trick that I would do. If it was coming from the right side, I would push, I don't even know what it's called, that little flap on your ear, and I would push it inward
Hmm.
and kind of plug my ear. So it would mute it. on that side. And it would get me through until I was able to either leave or it stopped.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, that's one technique. Were you starting to get also visual triggers as well? You mentioned a tactile, but watching people maybe make, um, watching people chew gum, for example,
Oh, I
or
can't.
eating. Yeah,
Oh, I
yeah.
can't. I can't. Yeah, it it kills me. It literally but then I like I said, it's a bummer because you get mad at these people and complete strangers sometimes and you're angry with them.
Have you done
And
that?
then
Have you, as
I've
an adult?
never
Yeah.
well, I've shot some, so not so much. I mean, I've been an adult for a long time, but I've been able to deal with it, I think, a little bit better since like my mid 30s, where I was able to kind of step outside of it and go, this is not something they're doing on purpose. You need to chill. And, I've always been really good. And again, that comes probably with the highly sensitive. I've always been really good to kind of see a situation for what it is. Um, but it doesn't make it any easier. And I would have to get myself out of the room. But I remember in my 20s, I would hear somebody, and going back to that bus story, I shot that woman daggers. I was like, do you not hear yourself? Like, we are on a crowded bus and that's all I can hear. And, it's just so much that I had to get off the bus. But I remember shooting her some daggers and she probably thought I was crazy. Like, she's like, I'm just on the bus, minding
So
my own business.
she saw you. She
Oh
hit
yeah.
that
I
glare.
wanted her
Yeah,
to,
yeah, yeah.
at that time,
Yeah.
I wanted her to see me. Like, do you not understand what you're doing right now? How rude.
Hmm.
And you just assume that it's just bad manners, but it's not. It's just the way I hear it, and it's what I zoom in on.
Yeah. Well, if you tell anybody, they'll assume that you just have a problem with bad manners. They'll never,
Yeah, they don't.
grasp the. What year was that? The bus incident. I'm curious. Whereabouts you mentioned? I think I might have been in San Francisco at that time.
Oh, so that must have been. So that must have been around 96, 97,
Oh, okay. No, that's
maybe
yeah
98.
before. Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So
That was an
I moved
interesting time
out
to
when
be in
I
San
was out
Francisco.
of my. You know what? It was a great time to be in San Francisco.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is a very different city now.
Right. Yeah.
It's a little bit of a bummer. I lived in North Beach, and I moved out of my folks' house when I was 17. I graduated high school when I was 17. I was like, peace out. I'm out of
Wow.
here.
Yeah.
And and um and moved, and it was such a fantastic time because North Beach is just kind of like a small little town
Mm-hmm.
in this big city.
Yeah. Cafe
So
Trieste and oh yeah, I love all those places.
yep. And
Um.
the North End Cafe was wonderful, and
Yep.
it's closed now. So yeah.
Oh no. Yeah, I moved there in 2001, so it was good times in the early 2000s as well. But yeah,
Sure.
it's changed.
Yeah,
um.
it really has.
So how did it go? Yeah. So I mean, as you're yeah, it sounds like perspectives kind of changed a little bit as you're getting older. Like, how about relationships as an adult? Was it kind of creeping into any of those?
Yeah, and
Sounds like they're worse.
well, it's funny. My boyfriend is one of the sweetest men on the face of the planet, and the anger I feel towards him when he's eating chips near me is not okay.
He's
But
a
I
Jekyll and
also
Hyde.
believe,
Yeah.
but what's funny is, like I said, I've kind of accepted it, and I've been a little bit more open about it, and I've been able to say, it's not you, it's me. I totally get it, but could you go somewhere else, or I'm going to go upstairs, or and there is a certain amount of humor you have to put in it, just to, I think, to get
Hmm.
through.
Hmm.
I think you
Well, it's good
kind of have
medicine
to
too.
laugh at.
Joking around. Yeah.
Absolutely.
The best
I
comedians have
think
a lot
that
of pain
that's
anyway. It doesn't even have to be misophonia. So it makes total sense.
agreed. But I also think that it's just, I mean, it's a crazy thing, to be that triggered and to have that type of a physical reaction by somebody just chewing next to you. And
Yeah.
if you don't laugh about it, you could spiral. I
Right.
mean, you have to take a position
Yeah.
of, this is something that I have to deal with. I'm going to be open and honest about it. And then maybe the people who love me will, change their behaviors or know that, okay, I'm going to eat the Doritos and it's going to be loud, so I'm going to do it in the other room, you know?
Was your
So
boyfriend think about it? Does he kind of accommodate? Is it like eye rolling?
no, he accommodates, and I can see him, and I've shot daggers at him too, just sitting at the dinner table with
Yeah, yeah,
him.
I'm sure.
And again, it's before I'm able to actually even think about it. Like I'll hear it and I'll look at him like, really? But then I have to go, okay, he's not doing anything wrong. But then I see him chewing a little slower, trying because he knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And then I get a rush of guilt because I'm like, this poor guy, he doesn't even know what he's signed up for.
Do you
So
maybe, I mean, when you know you're sitting down to eat, do you sometimes maybe kind of tell yourself, all right, 20 minutes, this could be, a little rough. We'll get through it. Or is it, I try to do that, but then I usually forget. And then it's like that. It's the shock that kind of, the surprise that kind of
right.
gets me.
Well, to be honest, I've gotten to the point where I make my son and my boyfriend dinner, and they eat together.
Mm.
There are times during the pandemic, we lived together, and during the pandemic, we made our office. We had desks that are right next to each other, and so what would happen is he would bring his lunch to his desk, and I would have to leave.
Yep.
And then I was like, this is time
I
for
knew
my
that was
lunch break
coming.
upstairs. My lunch break will be upstairs until you're done. And then I did, like I said, I got to a point where I make dinner and then they sit down and eat. And a lot of times I'm in the kitchen with them, but not sitting right there next to them. I love my son dearly. He's 16. He is my sun and moon, and I would throw myself in front of a moving train for him. But he's got this thing. He chews with his mouth closed, but it sounds like there's so much saliva in his mouth that I want, and it causes an anger to happen. But
Was it always the
again,
case with him, or is it something that, once he got to a certain age?
I only remember it the last few years with him. And, I also think it's funny that, when dogs are licking, it doesn't bug me.
Mm-hmm.
So when I hear pets doing it, it like I give them a pass somehow, or my brain gives them a pass. So I've
Yeah, it's
always
strange.
wondered, well, is that the same thing with you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've heard of that. A lot of other folks where it's like, yeah, somehow your brain assigns like a threat to a human more because I think it may be because it identifies a human as having free will and the ability, like they should be able to stop.
Sure,
The interesting
sure.
thing is also like it's usually kids get a pass too because I don't know. I feel at least my brain doesn't really assign the threat to them, but maybe at a certain age that goes out the window too.
Well, like I'm like, I taught you better than this, and I don't say that to him, but that's what I'm thinking.
Oh,
But
right, right.
you know, but I do believe there is something in our brains that goes, these humans, these people should know better, and so we
Mhm.
allow it in to trigger us. But when
Yeah,
it comes
yeah.
to animals, they don't know anything,
They're just
so
wild. Yeah, yeah,
they get a
whatever.
pass.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me.
Does
Um,
your has your son I'm assuming he must know about your sensitivities, right? I mean, you grew up with it.
oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Well, unfortunately, I think that he's got a little something
I was gonna
too,
ask.
like
Okay.
where, yeah. So he can't handle when forks hit the plate when
Mm,
they're eating,
hmm
and that sound. There's anytime the fork and the knife hit and it's like metal scraping.
Yeah.
And we've had a conversation about that, that he's like, I can't even have them touching. I can't even look at them touching. Because
Mm.
even when they're in the sink, I have to separate them. And so I go, okay, well, you're
Mm.
welcome.
Right.
You're getting all the
Well, we
good
don't know
parts
if
of
it's
me.
hereditary, but
Yes,
but at least at least he's got somebody who can he can talk to, who can kind of empathize a little.
absolutely.
And now probably he's got a better understanding of what you've gone through.
Absolutely. But, I would think it's hereditary. I mean, I know we don't know a lot about it, but I would
Yeah.
think because he has parts of my personality. And,
Hmm.
I really think it's a personality thing too. And, they
Hmm.
say that folks that are triggered by sounds and things like that, they're the highly intelligent ones. Or at least that's my story and
Hmm.
I'm sticking to it.
Oh yeah, and also creative. I mean, that's actually been
Sure.
identified. Actually, yeah. I mean, Dr. Marsha Johnson, who kind of first was the audiologist who kind of has really been popularizing this, has told me that like a biggest group of it, her patients, are engineers, and we also know we've seen tons of creative people, like people in the creative arts. Lots of
Hmm.
them have, and yeah, you mean for um in quote unquote industries or you know things where people need to be super sensitive and or focus a lot. It makes
Hmm.
sense that they would attract, well, they would misophonia would be a big part of their lives. So
Sure. It goes right back to that highly sensitive, highly
right.
aware personality trait, So, if this is the trade-off, I wouldn't change it because I like what it brings to, not the not the triggers and all of that, but I
Right.
like that what the highly sensitive thing brings to my life.
Right.
It
Right.
used to be a burden, but I actually really appreciate it now.
Yeah, that's a good
So
perspective.
if it's part
And
of it, then it's part of it.
yeah, and you said, I think you were telling me a while back that you've been more open about it. Is that something
Hmm.
that started maybe? Well, actually, why don't we talk about first? Like, when did you find out this thing had a name? You said you were Googling around for it. Was this in the last 5 years or 2 years or?
Oh, I would say probably about 5 years,
Hmm.
but I've been more open about it. You know what? I actually probably even further back than that because I've been really open about it in the relationship that I'm in now. And that's so it had to be, and that's over 5 years. So I would maybe 9 years. But
Yeah. Wow.
within the last 5 years, I've really said, oh, well, this is just a part of me, and I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to, people are going to understand it, and I am going to make light of it at times, so people are willing to understand it.
Hmm.
If that
Hmm.
makes any sense,
Well,
you
yeah.
know?
You can't just right. It's people are more likely to listen to something if you can kind of make it in a way that's maybe not so heavy at the beginning, especially when it's something that's hard for people to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, there are going to be people that trigger you more than others, you know?
Yep. Or well,
So,
has anyone asked you like, "Oh, do you mean something that sounds like this?" And then start to chew gum or anything?
yes, actually. And I go, that's exactly it. So you can stop now. So I'm glad we are on the same page. Now stop.
Right. Right.
Um, but I'm fortunate. I believe in quality over quantity of friends. So the people I
Yeah.
surround myself with, I can talk pretty freely about these things. And I mean, with the ADD, I just started talking to people about that because there was such a stigma. But I've
Ah.
been diagnosed for 15 years. So I just started talking to people about that because there were times that people would there's a shift. there are times where I'm looking right at them and I don't hear anything they're saying. So I'm looking at a bird behind them or whatever. And
Mm.
they see it, and I'll have to kind of explain, okay, here it is. This is what's going on. And there's part of
Mm.
me that thinks it's part of my charm, and the other part of me that doesn't.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So
In recent times, have you talked to professionals or therapists about misophonia as well?
yeah, it came up with my doctor,
Mm.
and he had offered anti-anxiety medication,
Oh, of course, right. Okay.
right? And I just kind of went, I don't think that's it.
Doesn't
Yeah, I
feel
don't.
right.
And
Yeah.
well, and I don't like that feeling of being out. I think that takes away from the things that I
The
do like.
sensitivity. Yeah.
Yeah. And so again, there are things that I think come along with that we have to just kind of, and what my dad used to soak it up, buttercup, because I don't want to give up those other things that I feel are a really good part of me. And that would dull out everything. So
Right. Right.
I chose not to.
Did you have siblings growing up?
Older brother, 8 years older than me, though.
Gotcha. Oh,
So
yeah. Okay.
we kind of both had an only childhood at one point or another.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
we're closer now than we were as kids.
Yeah. You know, no misophonia with him.
No, my
Okay. Yeah.
my brother got all the really cool, calm, cool and collected genes. I got I got everything else. He's the one
Yeah.
that's like just chill all the time.
Wow. Did you have you talked about it recently with any of your family members? Like since you knew it
So
had a name and everything.
I did talk to my mom a little bit about it, um, but she is one of those people that would take everything very personally. So I would never tell her how she has affected
Mm,
me or anything like that, because she's not somebody that we can sit down with and discuss our feelings. She would rather keep all of that, you know.
bottled
She
up.
wants to talk about, yeah, and talk about the weather, talk about what
Gotcha.
we're having
Yeah.
for dinner, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
If we get too deep into things, it's pretty
She's
uncomfortable for
uncomfortable.
her.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And me, I dig in deep to everybody. Like if you're a friend of mine, we're gonna know the ins and outs and good, bad,
Yeah.
ugly, and we're gonna love each other because of it. And so I didn't get that from her.
Yeah. You know, I've talked to some, yeah, talked to some, the episode might have gone live by now, but somebody who's in her late 80s now. And then she has a grandson who's a teenager. And so it's been interesting to kind of, it was interesting to compare how different generations treated
For
these kinds of
sure.
things. Like back then, yeah, you wouldn't talk about any of this stuff. It was just like,
No,
yeah,
it's a weakness. You
yeah,
don't talk
it's
about
like,
weakness. You
right.
don't, we're going to just turn a blind eye. You don't ask anybody how they're feeling. You don't want an answer to it. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think my folks were very much, don't tell anybody your business. Don't get emotional. And then I don't think they really knew what to do with me, because I was the emotional one. But it was when I was happy, when I was sad, when I was frustrated, when I was mad. It was just I I felt all the emotions all the time.
Yeah. How do
So
you, what are some of your coping mechanisms? Obviously, we talked about your AirPods and like leaving rooms. Do you have any other? Well, actually, yeah, we've talked to a few of your plugging one of the little folds in your ears. Do you have any other
that
little
is when you
tricks?
don't have anything else.
Yeah,
But
right, right.
and
Using your
that's
hands, and that's all you got.
Well, yeah, and that, and even trying to keep that as, discreet as possible,
Yeah.
because again, you don't want people to feel bad. And I think
Mm.
that's something that I deal with. Like I don't want anybody to think that I'm annoyed by them, even though I'm fully annoyed by them.
Yeah.
It's nothing that they can really control. So, I try to keep that, where I'm just kind of leaning my head on my hand, and I've got my finger in my ear. And
Mm-hmm.
I've been known to, put my earplugs in and hum a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But do you ever find that, like, when you can hear yourself chewing, that you're apologizing to people around you?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to say
Because I do
apologize to
that
them,
now
but
too.
right, right, right. Um, but yeah, when I think about it, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I guess. Wow, this sounds really loud, and I've heard other people, yeah, say similar things. But
But I feel
yeah,
like I'm apologizing to them, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" But I'm like, why aren't you as worried about me as I am worried about
yeah,
you?
no,
I'm like, is this really loud? Is it bugging you? I'm really sorry.
yeah. When I take that first bite into a red apple, I definitely think, oh shit, that was loud. But then like,
That was
there's
really
no
loud.
no one else is phased. But I'm like,
Right.
oh man.
But aren't you worried? But you're worried about the people around you when you do
Hmm.
that. It's
Briefly,
so
and then I
crazy.
remember where I am, and
Right.
and
Right.
then I'm like, yeah,
Right.
nobody gives a shit. So
You're back to center and you go, yeah,
yeah,
that's just me.
right,
But,
right.
honestly, there is just a lot of leaving the situation. I mean, that's because, again, I don't want anybody to feel bad. So I'll
Right.
figure out a reason to leave the room. I'll shorten the meeting. I will, or I'll just grin and bear it, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this when yeah, if you can't do anything else, you have to grin and
Yeah.
bear it.
Yeah.
But like what you said about, quality over quantity of friends, I mean, that's one way to kind of like control your environment.
Hmm.
Um, and and in terms of leaving, yeah, I mean, compared to like taking the chance, like rolling the dice and telling somebody, and then getting the whole dismissal or the caught or the making the trigger sounds. A lot of us we're
Right.
about the same age, but we're
Yeah.
just saying it's just too exhausting to kind of like, is it really worth the risk of somebody not reacting well? And then that stress
Well, and
just
are they a
adds
part
to
of my
your
fold?
right, right,
Do they need
yeah,
to know? Or
right,
is it
right,
something I can just deal with in this moment and I probably never have to see this person ever again? Or,
exactly,
you know, so
yeah.
it's on a need to know basis. And
And that's all part of the self-awareness. I mean, we're constantly making
hmm
those calculations. So
uh-huh, absolutely. Well, and I think that as you get older, um, you either continue on the same path and you're oblivious to everything around you, or you do become very self-aware and you understand why you react to things the way you react. And you're able to talk yourself off the ledge a lot easier as you get older because you understand yourself and you understand why you do the things you do. And
mhm.
most importantly, I think you accept your faults and your strengths, and you just, it's a part of you now, and you know how to deal with it, and you share with people when you need to share. And I just think I think it's a really good place to be, especially, when you have these types of conditions, and it's a good place to be, to just go, I understand what it is. Because
That's
sometimes if you don't understand, you're floundering, and now all of a sudden you have no coping mechanisms because it's spiraling. So having it, an understanding really helps.
no, that's an important message. Yeah, because I try to tell people who are younger, maybe they're teenagers, and they're like, this is starting to like totally proliferate, and it seems like it's getting out of control, and sometimes it could be really scary for people because they're like, well, this is getting worse and worse, and I'm just
Hmm.
a teenager, and they think that when they get into the workforce or when and out into the real world, it's going to kill them. But it's
Yeah.
it's important to let. That's always told me when you are out in the world, you at least you start to get more control over your environment. Yes, you might get more triggers, but you have more. You can kind of like pick where you want to live. You can,
Hmm.
you have more agency. And actually, you make a really good point about, yeah, you understand yourself better,
Hmm.
and that's actually that's another important message I think I'll borrow and steal and tell
Yeah, no,
people.
absolutely. Well, and I also think that, well, on a side note, do you know how many times I've thought throughout this conversation, I hope I'm not swallowing too hard. I hope I'm
Right.
not making any. Do you know? It's just a constant, like, I really hope that I'm not bugging anybody else. And, you know, um, I just, I, but you can only do what you can do. But
Oh,
I
don't
think
worry. Yeah,
when you,
this has been a clean conversation. I'll probably go back and
very
find all
good.
kinds of stuff in editing, but so far it's
Sure.
clean.
Good, good. But isn't that funny? Like it goes back to, when you take that bite of the apple, it's like all of a sudden you're worried about everybody else. And
Yeah,
that's a crazy way to live too. Wouldn't it be great to go through life like the majority of the population, just la-di-da and oblivious of how they affect other people?
yeah. I think yeah, you're right. The
I
majority of the population, but I wonder if there's a larger minority than we're probably even aware of that are
Oh, sure.
suffering like we are, and those are the people we need to get to.
Well, absolutely. And give them, hey, it really helps to know that there are other people that deal with it and you're not crazy. Like I said, when I was able to actually put a name to the condition, it's like, oh, it is a thing. It's not just me being a crazy person and overly sensitive. Because so growing up, I was always just told I'm overly sensitive. And so I would just chalk it up to my parents knew what they were talking about,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know? And to finally go, no, your parents aren't always right. And there is a thing. Yeah, and you've got it.
What about like a relative, uncles, aunts, cousins? Were they aware of it too, or your parents just kind of hid it from everybody? And curious.
So again, it's that whole make it seem like you have a beaver cleaver household. You don't talk
Mm-hmm.
about what's going on in your household, not even with your family. And being in a military family, we didn't really live close to any relatives anyway.
Right.
So you can hide a lot of things when you don't live next door.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
yeah, they
Right.
would
And
have
then
never talked to them.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I guess the advantage there is also you're not necessarily having the gigantic Thanksgiving or Christmas meals. Maybe you are. Maybe everyone's flying in, but
No, normally 6 to 8 people
yeah,
tops.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it
yeah.
wasn't a huge thing. Um, but, you know, my father passed away about 4 years ago. And I loved him dearly. But another thing that would happen is he would rub his feet together. And that was
Mm-hmm.
another triggering sound. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
just thinking, why does that bug the crap out of me? And I would tell him, I was like, why is that so loud? Why are you doing that? And he was like, you're crazy. What's wrong with you? I'm just rubbing my feet, Michelle. I was like, I'm not kidding. It's all I can hear. I can't even watch TV right
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
I was always just amazed on how much it would just take over,
yeah.
where I that's all I hear. And I would not, I mean, you could tell me I won $1 million and I wouldn't hear you because I would be listening to somebody chew or my dad's feet rubbing or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It was all consuming.
It's interesting. I mean, it's such a strong reaction, and then all these other conditions like ADD, you have all these medications and therapies that supposedly work,
Right.
but there's like nothing even like no one knows about this, let alone can offer some therapy. I mean, there's like CBT. There's some things that seem to maybe help a little bit, but more
Well,
often than not, you'll just get deer in the headlights look.
well, but think about it. Everything else has signs outwardly, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Don't you think?
Right.
So, when even like with depression, she's not getting out of bed. She's dissociating herself or, whatever.
Mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
with misophonia, you go, that sound really bugs me. But they
Right.
can't hear what you're hearing.
Right.
And
Right.
they just think that you're being a pain in the butt. Whatever, Michelle. It's one of those things where you kind of have to take my word for it.
Yeah. I
And if you
guess.
kind of
Yeah.
have to take my word for it, they're not going to, and they're not going to just start prescribing things. Luckily I had a doctor who wanted to help, but I didn't want what he wanted to prescribe.
Right. The anti-anxiety medication. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to dull out what I like about myself. I just want to dull out the sound.
Right. Right. Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's the thing about this. I mean, because some people are annoyed by sound. People just assume we're just further. We just have a more extreme case of it, and then period. End of
right,
story.
right.
They don't
Well, but
realize it's
also
a step
that,
function.
Well, but also that, well, you're just overly sensitive.
Yeah,
And they kind of roll
yeah,
their eyes like, yeah, whatever, it doesn't bug me. You are just being dramatic. And there was a lot
right,
of that. You're just
right,
dramatic,
right, right.
and and it gets shrugged off and you become a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And I think that that's how I felt, in my youth is I'm the one that's just a pain in the ass because I'm the one that's just sensitive. So, until you get past that, that's not the case and you're willing to talk about it and accept it and understand it, you're gonna believe that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did it cause any um I don't know, distance between yourself and family members? It seemed like it, you were able to kind of like compartmentalize it a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
there were always issues as a teenager because again, I came from a family that was you walk that straight line, you get a good
mm,
state job with a good pension, and don't be
mm,
creative. This is not how this because it was a military family. I had a family that made a great living and a wonderful life for their family through the military, and the military told you what to do.
mm,
So no free thinking, no, and if they had a child, me, who that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to go out and experience and do and feel. I wanted to
mm-hmm,
feel everything and experience everything. So there was always a disconnect from
mm-hmm,
my family. And I think that's why right when I graduated high school, I needed to move. I was like, I gotta get out of here.
mm-hmm,
Um, but it came full circle because it goes right back to understanding who you are. And just because it's not who your parents, it didn't fit in that little cookie cutter that your parents wanted. Um, Once you understand that that's not you, it's them,
mm-hmm,
you can come back and make a relationship with your family
mm.
that works for you. Does that make any sense? I'm probably not explaining it.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of there's probably a lot of analogies, but in general, it's like you can kind of drift. I don't want to say drift apart, but you can kind of like start to become your own person around teenage years and a little later, and then once you are able to look back with some perspective, you can
Hmm.
kind of re I don't know, reassociate or maybe not reassociate, but create something new. Um, and that could be a
We can
positive
only
thing.
blame our parents for so long. Do you know what I'm
Right.
saying? It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and I kind of go, okay, until you're 24, we can maybe blame our parents for that. And then after that, we have to take account. We have to be accountable.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what happened with me. I was like, well, accountable for my actions, but also understanding that not everything your parents said to you or did was going to work for you,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know? But also understanding that they did the best that they could with what they had and how they were raised.
Yeah. Everything was happening in real time based on
Yep, experience too.
their experience. Yeah.
So you take what works and you leave behind what didn't, and you make your own
Mm-hmm.
path. So
Yeah,
yeah.
so we're getting close to an hour. This is
Oh
really
wow.
interesting. As you can tell, it goes by freaking fast.
Yeah, it totally
But
did. Nice.
but yeah, I mean, but I still want to give you a chance to like share. Is there anything else, anything you kind of want to share with listeners? Maybe the woman on the bus. Anything you want.
I'm
um,
sorry for shooting daggers at you. I know that you were. I now understand it wasn't a personal attack. Honestly, and it's what I always tell my son who is 16. It's we have to accept who we are and embrace it instead of trying to fight it. Because a lot of the time, our little quirks and our the things that we feel are fault are some of the best things that we have to offer if we find that silver lining. So I really do believe that it kind of goes back, like I said, that highly sensitive thing. If this is what comes with being highly sensitive, I'll take it because I think, yeah, you feel those lows and they're really low, but man, those highs, those highs are really high and I wouldn't give that up. So give it to me
Yeah,
all
you
day
feel like
long.
it's a bit of it feels like a bit of a superpower to kind of feel more, and maybe even, especially when you're
Yeah,
able to sense what other people are feeling, it does feel like a superpower, like you're understanding something on another level.
I agree. And then people go, oh God, are we talking about empaths or what? No, I'm talking about just being aware, like really highly aware of what's going on around you and mannerisms and body language
Hmm.
and being able to sit next to somebody and kind of go, hey, you good? Is everything okay? Um, and they're like, how'd you know? I was like, I just felt something. I just wanted to
Hmm.
check in on you. And so I think it all goes together and
Hmm.
I wouldn't change it. I'll deal with it,
It's a
with
trade-off
my
that's
ear.
worth it. Yeah, yeah.
I really think that, but maybe I'm Pollyanna and I always see the bright side in dark times. But like I said, I think that we have to accept everything about ourselves because it makes us very unique.
Well, it's a great, yeah, it's a great positive note to end on. So yeah, Michelle, I mean, yeah, thanks for it's a wide ranging in a short amount of time. Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation. Yeah, really interesting to hear about
You got
your
something.
history. Yeah, no, it's really good. Yeah,
Awesome.
thanks for coming on.
Well, I appreciate you talking to me about it. It's very rare that you can actually have an hour-long conversation
Right,
with
I know.
somebody about it, which is so it's actually very lovely. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That was a super fun conversation. Remember, if you like this episode, don't forget to leave a quick review or just hit the 5 stars wherever you listen. You can hit me up by email at hello@misophoniapodcast.com or go to the website misophoniapodcast.com. And it's probably easiest to send a message on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. And once again, you can support the show at patreon.com/misophoniapodcast. The music, as always, is by Moby. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.